This section is about self-defense and the law. It's one of the things my students often ask about. This does not constitute legal advice. So first of all, in general, don't worry about the law when you're in a self-defense situation. Worry about being safe. In my opinion, it's far better to be safe and have to justify your actions in a court than it is to be a victim. Okay, so basically common law states that a person may use reasonable force to defend themselves, defend others, or defend their property. So what does that mean? What is reasonable? Firstly, reasonable force is measured by the severity of the perceived threat. So say for example, someone has a knife, there's a high chance of severe or fatal injury. Therefore, it's reasonable to use extreme force. However, if it's a minor scuffle and you use extreme force and break people's arms, etc., that's going to be unreasonable. And this is not based on what you think is reasonable, it's based on what a jury believes is reasonable. Measured response. The law doesn't require you to be measured in your response. That is, if someone strikes you and you strike them back, but you happen to be more effective at it, that's their bad luck. Also, if in the course of taking reasonable action you cause more damage than you were expected to, again, you're not expected to be measured. Anger and revenge. In a self-defense situation, it's so important that we make sure our assailant is no longer a threat to us. We want to make sure that we aren't at risk of them coming back and attacking us again. However, from here there is a fine line between that and anger and revenge, where we're excessively hurting our attacker and it may appear that we're acting out of anger or revenge. So, the big question to ask yourself is, when is the point where your opponent is no longer a threat? You may have front kicked them and now they're at a distance from you and they're probably off balance. Is that the point where they're no longer a threat? Probably not. It is, they may be covering up and you may be overwhelming them and they've stopped attacking you. Again, probably not. They're probably still a threat to you there. Even if you back off, they'll probably attack again. Is it when you've knocked them to the floor? Well, maybe. They may still get back up again. So you've got to be ready for that possibility and ready to take measures to stop them getting back up. Is it when they're unconscious? Absolutely, definitely they're no longer a threat to you when they're unconscious, although people are, unlike in the movies when people get knocked out, they're usually only out for a couple of seconds, not for minutes or sometimes indefinitely for hours. But generally, from here, if you knock someone out, they're not going to be much of a threat to you anymore. However, is it excessive to not stop attacking them until they're unconscious? So, each situation is different. It depends on the severity of the threat that the assailant poses to us. Lastly, a police student advised me that kicking people in the head when they're down is almost certainly going to be seen as excessive and unreasonable to the law. The only time we teach this is in a knife self-defense situation where there's a high chance of the attack being fatal. Preemptive striking. There is a myth that you need to wait until an assailant strikes first or initiates their attack before you can strike them. This is just that, a myth. You have the right to respond to a perceived threat. If you think their attack is imminent, I would advise you to preemptively strike, seize the initiative before they do. Perceived threat. Equally, a threat may not be real, but if you perceive it to be real, you have the right to defend yourself. Defending others. For most of us, we protect our loved ones without thought of consequence or personal danger. However, if you saw an acquaintance or even a stranger being attacked, should you step in? It's a tough choice that you should consider right now. If you value protecting yourself over your sense of justice, then it's probably best that you avoid the situation. You must also consider how vulnerable the victim is, how serious the attack is to the victim, how much risk and danger is there to you, both now in the self-defense situation and also in possible future retaliations. But regardless of your choice, first always call 112 whenever someone's in danger, or ask others to call 112 before taking action. Defending property. While you're legally allowed to protect your property, it's generally not worth putting yourself at risk for property. Let me illustrate this with two examples. If you're being mugged, it's best to give them your money and your phone. They're worth a couple of £100, which is a lot, But consider how much you'd pay not to get stabbed. Even if they don't threaten you with a knife, assume that they're carrying one, and if you escalate the situation, they might draw it. Note that a child being bullied by other children out of their lunch money is a recurring situation. It's bullying, not mugging, and should be treated differently. Another common crime is teenagers or gangs vandalising property, keying cars or badging cars. If you see this, do not confront them. Situations like this often quickly escalate and have often resulted in someone being overwhelmed and repeatedly kicked on the floor, sadly resulting in deaths in many cases. The alternative is of course to call 112, the emergency services number, and if possible, extremely discreetly taking photos of them with your phone. The best self-defense for your property is to insure it.